I would say this very roughly.
Yep, yep.
We're probably at about $200,000 for the pumps themselves.
Yep.
Another 200 for the generator.
Okay.
100 for the electrical control system. And the remaining 250, I would say, is some buffer in for the pump sizes, potential, as well as the structure.
Okay.
Again, that's, I would say, very rough.
No, that's fine, that's fine. So what I had sort of looked at, we had been given $20,000 a year as sort of the cost, not only for the repairs and the operations, but also for the ultimate replacement.
Correct.
In 25 years for the backup generator and 20 years for the pumps. And if you kind of just do the rough math, between just the replacements on the generator and the pumps, you're almost at $20,000 a year just for that. So I didn't know if the costs of maintenance and operations of those things is just so small that it's not really there, or is that 20,000 too conservative? Or too optimistic? Yeah.
The maintenance is minimal with assumption and discussion with village staff that there are village staff whose job it is to do that and would be going out, and these potential pumps would be able to be worked into that rotation.
Okay. And they aren't operating that often, so there's just not that much draw on utilities or whatever else has to get.
We did some rough calculations on the electrical consumption, and we are in the hundreds per year with our anticipated how many times they would run. So it was rather minimal in the long picture.
Then my last question would center around, and I think Brian was starting to get to this earlier. It sounds like the need for the backup generator is only for back-to-back storms, and then you'd only need it if you had two huge back-to-back storms that would essentially fill up the things, right? So
and a power outage. You need the power outage in order to use the generator. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Exactly. That's
so
what I mean.
You're compiling.
But if you're going to have storms like that, you're
event
probably going to lose power, or you're very likely to lose power. So I guess the question is there an absolute need for the generator, the backup generator? Do we really think there's going to be two storms big enough back to back? They're going to fill up the entire tank a day later. I'll throw that out there for the village to consider. It's not really our decision, but
certainly, and I'd say that there's not an absolute need, and it comes down to level of comfort and protection with that redundancy, and that would be up to the village staff and to decide.
Yeah, and it's less than I thought it was based on what was in the report, so it's less of an issue for me than it was before. Those are my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Todd, you had.
I just wanted to just confirm that there is a lot of leeway as far as where these pumping stations could go, and still be within a pretty close window of what the projected costs are. In other words, if you're taking up this square, that you could put the pumping station in a variety of different areas. Is that correct?
Yes, I would give that with the addition that the further we are away from the inlet outlet pipe area, the more expensive it would end up being, because we'd be pumping the water out and we'd have to route it from wherever the lift station is around to the sewer. So the further we get away,
in some of the parks, it could really obstruct the usability of the park if they're not put in a smart location.
Certainly, and I think it would we would anticipate working with all parties involved in choosing that location that would best suit the needs of the facility, the village's concerns, and the park district and the people who utilize the park's concerns.
Yeah, specific to Thornwood. So recognizing that the least impactful option for the trees and the site overall is the one that would require a pumping station. It looks like they can be buried below or above ground. They could have a facility around it or a building. All of that is going to be determined later.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have some clarification on that. Does the pumping station, does part of it always have to be above ground? I mean, there was some comment, or can it all be below ground on a pumping station? Or All the pictures you've shown have shown an above-ground component to
So
it.
the generator and electrical controls would certainly have to be above ground, as well as there needs to be
But the pump
a
itself is always-
larger access than your standard 2-foot diameter manhole lid, so that they can get equipment, they'll use a lift to get the pumps in and out, so that equipment can access it, as well as some vent pipes. So if we didn't have generators, and, we could reduce that footprint, and make it less conspicuous
That's what I
and
was
easier
partly
to.
asking, I mean, how, you can play with the actual size of what's above ground. You're saying, that's not good use, but there is no standard size for what needs to be above ground. There's flexibility on that size.
It's probably
Gotta be
a
big enough for the
minimum.
It's
generator,
fairly
yeah.
standard, yeah, I mean, the
Okay.
Minimum
footprint,
size.
the footprint is probably between the
I
two
mean, the
pumps.
size of the pumps, yes, okay.
Yeah, the footprint on the ground is probably in, like, similar to the generator, like a 6x12
Okay, that's what I'm
footprint
curious.
with
Thank
maybe
you.
a couple vents coming out of it. But that could be fairly low profile without, the addition of the generator, and the electrical controls would need to be located right there, as well as more of a pedestal type box.
Thank you.
So 6x12, if I may, that, you say that's basically the pump house, and a generator area would add, you said double, but I suspect even more than that to the house.
Yeah, we would need a little separation, and the numbers are approximate.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay, I had a couple questions. Are these tanks as effective with the pumps as they are with the gravity feed? Meaning, like, will the tank clear out as quickly as it would with gravity with the pumps?
That is the intention of the design, yes.
Okay, so there shouldn't be any difference or any water that should be stuck in there. Okay. And then as far as where these pump stations can be located, kind of Todd brought it up, I was thinking of Hibbard, could it go like on the side of like our building that's already there, or something to make it kind of not in the middle of a park? Or, I mean, the other parks, there's nothing really around them building-wise, but at Hibbard, we do have a facility there. Could it kind of be tucked away next to the building?
Again, there's definitely flexibility as to where it could be located.
Okay.
The further from the inlet outlet areas, so where the pipes are coming into the facility, the higher the costs are going to be by having to route additional
Right,
piping
longer.
to get the water to our sewers.
Okay.
Do we know where those pipes are coming in and out now, or?
There are arrows on the
Okay.
images, the exhibits in your memo,
Perfect.
identifying those locations.
All right, I think that's all the questions from us. We're going to open this up to the public. I'd like to remind everybody that we do have a public policy comment, so if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, please, that would be great, because there's a lot of people I know that would like to speak. Also, if you address us, that would be awesome, and we will try to get any information you need if we don't have it to you eventually, but we'll try to move things along here quickly. So who would like to address us first, please? Sorry, someone already stood up. Raising hands, or you can come up. You stood up first. Come on. And if you could state your name and address, that'd be great for the record, please.
Yeah.
Sure.
Tag team.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Sullivan. I live at 1221 Colgate Street, and so therefore my property backs up to the park.
And I'm Sophie Candido, and I'm at 1221 Colgate Street. You're at 1225.
1225, yes. Oh, yeah, I'm speaking for her.
We don't live together.
And actually, we had separate comments, because I'm going to speak for 3 minutes, and then
Yep.
she'll go
That's
at it.
fine.
So we have been coordinating the communication efforts of the Colgate Street Neighborhood Association, which represents about 35 families directly near Thornwood Park, and we're also communicating with about 100 more local families. So we look forward to working with all of you as we try to resolve the village's urgent stormwater issues. I have 3 minutes, so I'm just going to read.
Go for it.
We've been following this project for years, so we understand the village's decision to utilize 3 parks for underground water storage was made prior to inviting the Park District to give input. So one area of focus for our neighborhood association was to ask the questions, is Thornwood Park the only option available to solve the village's stormwater issue? Do we all feel confident that every option was explored and was deemed suboptimal before we dig up this beloved, high-use, tree-filled park? In order to answer our questions, we've had a very healthy email exchange with the village, specifically Bridget Berger-Raish, Director of Engineering and Public Works, who has so kindly replied to our queries about alternate locations. I believe you've had access to that email exchange. We hope that you, as the ultimate decision makers, feel confident that all possible storage locations have been explored, and that you truly feel that we've gathered the quantitative and qualitative pros and cons of every storage option. And we hope, ultimately, that you can convey that confidence to us. We know that the village and the engineers must think that we're beating a dead horse because of their years of research. But we're here to represent our neighbors who might be new to this project, as are many of you recently elected Park District Commissioners. To recap, here's the feedback we've gathered from the village via email about our suggestions. And I paraphrase because you have the emails. Number 1, these are different options. Malincrot will not be considered due to the tree loss that will be required, thereby permanently altering the nature of the park. 2, Howard Park is in the combined sewer area, which is completely different watershed that drains to Lake Michigan. 3, Avoca Park is too far away from Kenilworth Gardens to be cost effective. 4, Centennial Park was vetted as an alternate location for the community playfield storage and ultimately removed from consideration because of construction limitations. 5, storage under the streets is not feasible because of conflicts with the existing underground utilities under the street. So the pushback we've received from our neighbors is that we'd like to have some access to high-level estimates of the Avoca Park option, plus some descriptions of construction limitations for Centennial Park and for this under-street water storage. We've been encouraged by some of the recent engineering research, which has yielded new options for less money. For example, in the past 6 months, engineers were able to determine that a new choice, community playfields, was a preferable option to the proposed Centennial Park. And in just the past 2 weeks, engineers have been able to design and present 7 new vault configurations for the 3 parks based on public input, which are actually much less expensive options. So we wonder what would be possible if the Park District did not have the early August deadline to sign the intergovernmental agreement for all 3 parks together, thus sealing the fate of Thornwood Park. We wish there were an opportunity for the village and the Park District to use the 3 years leading up to the Thornwood project to learn from the first 2 parks and to decide if Thornwood is still the most viable option. So we look forward to hearing from each of you about your personal opinion on the use of this Park District property for this stormwater management issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so in partnership with my neighbor Kathleen, we've spent the past month educating ourselves and our neighbors on the stormwater tank project. While we obviously would much prefer this project would be moved elsewhere, we understand the need for a stormwater solution. If it's determined that Thornwood Park is truly the optimal location for this project, then we'd like to express our combined feedback below. After attending the meeting at Thornwood Park on May 22nd, we heard our neighbors loud and clear state they were in favor of saving as many trees as possible. In fact, one neighbor actually said, "I'd like to advocate for the trees," and the crowd erupted into spontaneous applause. Last week, we were really happy to review the 3 possible configurations for the stormwater tank at Thornwood Park. We felt that our combined comments had really been taken into consideration. However, we feel that there's only one viable option. The proposed configuration, along with alternative configuration number 1, are unacceptable, as they remove between 53 to 60 mature commemorative trees. They remove the berm and the trees that provide our homes with privacy. They expose our property's potential new water runoff problems from an impermeable structure, and they put a massive construction project right behind our backyard. Our priorities are to maintain the aesthetics of Thornwood Park, to save as many trees as possible, and to maintain our privacy by retaining the berm behind our homes. We, along with our neighbors, are willing to work with the Park District on alternative configuration number 2, or Project Dig Deep, as we've been calling it. This proposal will cut the proposed footprint in half by digging deeper, will require only 3 trees to be taken down, and will actually save over $1.5 million in construction costs. However, we still have huge concerns around the amount of dirt being stockpiled on site and its location, the project itself being fenced in and the height of the fence, the security issues around the park and around our homes, with construction teams in and out of the park, drainage issues including rerouting stormwater and runoff in our backyard, the duration of time that the park will be out of commission and its reconstruction. We'd like to see sod and not seed so that restoration can be faster, the style and location of the pump room and the generator, the diesel emissions that we'll be exposed to while the trucks are transporting the soil out of the park, not to mention the impact of this project on families, children, Harper School students, and the dogs in the neighborhood. All we want to do is keep our park intact and not destroy it. And if construction is to take place, we ask that you return the park to its current situation as soon as possible. Because Thornwood Park is a unique neighborhood gem, it's the reason we all moved into this neighborhood, and we want to preserve it for future generations to enjoy. So thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well prepared.
Next. Sir.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Hi.
And I want to thank Mr. Abbott, particularly for responding to my letter and to the board's willingness to accept the community input about the trees. Is it possible to get the slide on community playfields?
Get your
back
name
up?
and address.
Rick Prohoff, 2435 Pomona Lane.
Thank you.
Can you put it, wherever you are, the
Yeah.
Z,
He's
the
doing
Z
it.
one?
Which one?
The Z.
It's the
that
next
The
one.
Z one?
That one.
Yeah.
Okay.
My question's specifically about this plan is how far are the root systems of those cottonwoods to the lower part of the picture there on the lower part of the Z? Is there enough room to be certain that the trees would survive? Has anybody been looking at that? Maybe they can. Second question is there any possibility of moving even further to the left so that you don't have that particular problem with those particular root structures? So that was the second concern. Does this one have gravity fill, or is this with pumps?
This was gravity. There's no pump on this
So
one.
there is a potential for having no pumps at all if you use a little bit further to go west of the trees. But I'm thankful that we're going through this exercise to see what can be done. Clearly, it's noted that Mr. Wilson reported that it's a part of the concern of the Park District, or the benefit of doing all this might be to get new fields in this location. We understand that. I've lived there for over 30 years. I think the fields are possibly not perfect, but the trees are, to me. So I appreciate your considering not having those 2 extra fields and living with what you have. The last thing I would say is that we had quite a bit of rain lately, and the area where those trees are today had a flock of ducks in it. So it was only 3 days and it was completely cleared. It may be soft, but it was dry. And I can't tell you how many gallons of water was there, but it was good 6 to 7 inches deep because it's a natural retention area. And the reason there was no need for pumps is because those trees are taking up all that water instead of 3 days. So to the extent it's a natural system, obviously there's a lot of us that would like to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address us?
I will say, I'm not a horticulturist, but in general, and I don't know, cottonwood trees might be different, but in general, the drip line of the leaves defines the root size underneath that's the general rule of thumb.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Wendy Schultz. I live at 2130 Beechwood Avenue. And my comments are related to the flooding that occurs in Kenilworth Gardens area and the impact that a Thornwood Park storage solution would have on our neighborhood. I'd like just to revisit the purpose for the neighborhood storage solution. I've been coming to municipal service committee meetings, village board meetings, and now to the Park District meeting for over 6 years. I've lived in Wilmette since 2000. Our street has experienced flooding up to my waist in 2000, 2001, 2005, 2008, 2011 up to the knees, 2013, and 2016. As an illustration, this is a school bus that stopped at 21st and Beechwood, where the water would be up to the neck of a kindergarten child on the bus. It stalled, it could go no further. This level of water is what we experience when we have these extreme, stormwater events. May was really wet, but it didn't come down in the volume to cause this kind of flooding. So I am in favor of whatever the community feels is the best design and solution for Thornwood Park. I would say that the advantage that the last gentleman brought up, that trees do absorb water, any water that is taken out of the ground means that it's not in our streets. So if preserving trees has a multiple benefit of aesthetics and removing water, I'm all in favor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sorry. Oh. Whoever wants to go first.
Hi, I'm Jim Kearney. I'm at 2241 Thornwood.
just west of, east of Hunter on Thornwood. I just have two questions. One is, with alternate configuration 2, the depth of the vaults is 11'4". How far is that below the level of the storm drains?
Probably around 5 feet, because he said 6 feet is the
6 feet
6 feet
below
down.
the storm feet.
6 feet would be comparable with the level of the drain, so that would be another 5, almost 5.5 feet down.
So there's 3 feet of dirt on top of the vault, and the vault is...
6 feet.
I'm just wondering, if how much below the gravity level
Probably
of
another,
the storm
like
drain.
half the size, like 50%,
Half, I
is my
see,
guess.
I see.
Yeah.
So
I do
if
the
we
math.
didn't even have, if
You're
we
right.
didn't have a generator, and we had a 100-year flood following, we would need a generator to get that bottom 5 feet out.
You need the pump, not the generator.
Yeah, pump,
Yes.
excuse me, yes. And it would only be the generator in case we had a power outage.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Yes.
it would have to be a second 100-year flood and a power outage to get the bottom 5 feet. Otherwise, gravity would still be conducting that top 5 feet.
It's not a
of the-
100-year flood, it's a 10-year flood.
10-year.
10-year?
But then
Okay.
the water would sit there. There would be no way to get it out without the pump.
Without the, well, it'd be the pump, but then the generator.
The generator, correct, yes,
Okay.
right.
If
The power
that,
comes
if
back
that
on.
Yeah,
happened.
until the Power would come back
The
on,
power was
correct.
back on.
Or
Correct.
mobile
maybe-
generators hooked up.
Okay, so then kind of following on that would be how much would you need above ground if you, I think you suggested that the pump could be below ground, not the generator.
Correct,
Right.
but there would be additional things that would need to be above ground with the pump, electricity, some outlet, some air kind of things.
But it sounds
some
like-
fence, so there would be some things above ground.
And the word house was used as kind of a structure to cover all of it.
Housing, yeah, like some sort of
Housing,
something.
at least protective or
I think both, so that, it's not being played with
Yeah, 'cause
probably by,
Yeah, a few visuals that could help
Yeah,
explain.
like something like that.
Now, for instance, in the upper left corner there.
Correct.
Yes.
That's very
There's
minimal.
nothing around
That's very
that.
minimal. You could conceal that with, as you said, vegetation or
Correct.
landscaping or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. So, good question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Chip McCall. I'm at 2116 Beechwood in Wilmette. So like Wendy, I've been coming here for, I think it's 7. I think it's 7 or 8 years that we've been coming to these meetings. But it's weird, now it's a completely new board. So, I mean, you're not Bob Belinsky.
No, well, no, we just got this in the last year.
I know,
Yeah.
right. So a little bit of deja vu, but a little difference. But agree with Wendy, it's been a long time coming. There have been tons of studies. The village finally made a decision. The board, we think, made the right decision with the storage system. We live in the neighborhood. We love Thornwood Park. Our kids grew up playing baseball there. I coach there, walk the dogs there, play tennis there, the trees, everything. We love it. But we also love Wilmette. And I would love to be able to be speaking to someone who learns that I live in Wilmette and talks about the flooding, and I say, yeah, but you know what? The village is really doing something about it and took on a huge project to make it much better. So the fact that this decision was made over a year ago to do something, and they had a solution, I'm trying to be optimistic that we're really close to breaking ground on this, and I like that. And I'm glad and appreciate the support that you all bring to this project. It's very nice to see a solution that saves trees, seems to have the same efficiencies, and saves $1.5 million. So being an optimist, yes, it's going to be probably a year or two of construction that's not good for around the neighborhood, and we agree with that. But wow, and we might come out of this with Thornwood Park where you don't play 50% of the baseball games because you actually have better drainage.
Right.
You actually can have a rainstorm 2 days prior and still get a baseball game in and not have a flooded park. Maybe we could even in that storage or in the pumping station have a building that would have some restrooms instead of a porta potty on the north side of the park right there. We could come out of this with a better park and a solution for a flooding Wilmette on the west side. So we appreciate your support. Thank you very much, and I look forward to having this project started.
Thank you. That's our intention as well. Anyone else? Show of hands? Oh, yes, ma'am.
My name is Lynn Hornig. I live at 2446 Iroquois, which is just south of Thornwood. I would like to advocate again for the trees. We had someone renovate their home behind us, which I believe caused the loss of a large elm tree. Next to us, they also renovated, complete new construction, and 5 years later, the elm tree in their front yard also died. So construction is really bad for tree roots, so to put these huge tanks as far away from all these trees once it goes in just would be really helpful, because the trees are affected by deep construction like this. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Richter, and I have just two questions to the design of the Thornwood Park Alternative 2. I'm wondering if there's any option or chance to move that tank further to the west underneath the baseball fields. I don't know if that's a feasible option or not, because I don't know why it's pushed.
I think they were trying to keep from having to remove the backstops. Wasn't that part of it?
Because there's,
Going
I
further
don't know, there
west?
seems to be space between the street and even the trees there, so to move it further out west. And then to the question of the pump house, it looks like if it has to be near the in and outlet, that would be on the southeast side of the park. Would that be an option to move it to the north side that's closer to the playgrounds, where there's currently a little more space for maybe the trees, and also there's the portal at the, anyway, I guess that's immovable. Anyways, those are the two questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone? Going once? Yes, ma'am.
And we recently purchased a property at 2427 Pomona Lane. So my question is, I mean, the reason we purchased the property there because of the community play field. It's beautiful park. So my question is, what happens if there is excess water? Where does it get released? And what happens if there is a buildup in the reservoir? If there is a slit? What happens if there is extra maintenance required?
So the water, it's intended all the water from the storms will go into this tank and be held until the storm sewers are cleaned out, and then the water will go out into the storm sewers.
If there is an excess storm, I mean, will that be released? Will the area get flooded?
Yeah, so similar to what happens today without the tanks, that's where the water is going to go first. So it'll reduce the amount of water and the likelihood of water, but if there is water in excess of the capacity of the tank, it's still going to find its way into low-lying areas within the parks, in the streets, and around the neighborhood.
That's an interesting question. Can I put it to the engineers? So will the park continue to take water once the tanks are full? Water from outside the park? Do you know what the nature of Sasha's question here is? What? So right now we're bringing water into the park, so we're going to fill up the tank. And the tank gets full. We got 5 inches of rain in 4 hours. Oops, we're a little bit full. What happens?
Darren Olson with Christopher Burke Engineering. And Steve hit it right on the head. I mean, the water is going to go, once the tanks fill up, the water will seek its own level, which means it will go to the same low spots that it does now, but it will just do it less frequently.
A lot less.
Yes, a lot less.
Less frequently, a lot less water, but basically it's going back into the streets where
that's exactly
we'll
correct.
Take the first 3 inches in the first 3 hours.
Yeah, but it'll be stored in the tank, and then the rest of it will accumulate in the streets just like it does now.
So it doesn't come to the park. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Ellen Largay at 1217 Dartmouth, so right on the west side of the park. My question is about replanting, regardless of what the footprint is. Since it's 3 feet of soil, you can't really plant anything that's going to grow in any height.
Right.
So that's just...
Yeah, no big trees.
No
but
big trees will go
no
on
big trees
those
that can go on
spots.
top, and no buildings, nothing can ever really be put on top of it other than soil and a playground, fields, things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Okay, I just was confirming that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
That's okay.
To her point, though, I think in the meeting at Thornwood, we talked about irrigation, that the grass would actually stay green during the hot part of the season, summer. Is that still in the mix, or?
Irrigation from
Irrigation,
the
the
tank?
water, no, sorry, just keep the water, the grass green and moist, and so it won't be burning on that
On top
tank,
of it.
because there's only that.
So I was
yeah,
at the meeting. So one of the concerns was if the tank is so efficient at draining the park itself that the grass would ultimately become so dry and burnt out and not. So one of the things that was thrown out was that in systems similar to this that the engineering team have put together, there have been irrigation solutions, sort of a gray water sort of solution that could be considered here.
Okay. Great. Anyone else? Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Thank you for all your comments.
I know we're going to pick up this topic
Yes,
again later
we are.
on. I got the feeling, I'd kind of like to say a few things about this. I mean, I could wait till later. I have the feeling people will be leaving. I kind of want to say it so
Okay,
people
we
understand where
we
I
can
am.
discuss it now if you'd like.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I just want to recap. We've been through 6 public meetings. I've gone to all these meetings, and I think that these meetings have taught us a great deal. We've had 4 parks basically being considered, with Centennial being the other one that was considered. We got a lot of public discussions, and it led to some very productive dialogue with regard to the implementation of this plan. So my appreciation goes out to the staff and to the community for engaging in this process. How are we going to implement this in the best way? So what have we learned? I believe that we've learned, one, the stormwater plan enjoys strong support within the community. That the individual character of our parks is highly prized, that there's broad satisfaction with the current state and status of these parks, and that trees matter. These are not mutually exclusive things that we have learned. The last point that I'd like to make isn't so much what we learned, is reinforced. We are a community of neighbors. I appreciate that. We go out of our way to help each other, and the need to solve the stormwater flooding issue seems to be universally acknowledged, and that's no small thing. It's a testament to the generous care and caring nature and character of the community that people really do seem to want to make this happen. We have some options under consideration, and I really want to thank Bridget, the engineers. I want to thank Steve. I think you guys have been terrific at taking these community concerns and coming up with options that address these concerns. It's been my goal, just want to say, that implement this plan without unduly creating winners and losers. I know there's going to be sacrifices, but I didn't want to feel like one neighborhood lost out because of another neighborhood. I think we're getting there. And again, thanks to the staff and the engineers that you performed admirably. With regard to the specifics, the community playfield, these are my thoughts. We're not voting tonight. I just wanted to, I feel that people should know kind of where I'm going. I'm one of 7 commissioners, but this is where I'm going. Clearly, the neighbors love the fact that this is a park for them, and that the quiet nature and green nature of the park is really important to them. We know, we call it the playfields, and certainly on the weekends there's a lot of playing going on there, but other times they want to protect that quiet green nature of the park. They understand that. They've made that loud and clear. The fate of the cottonwoods become the flashpoint issue, obviously. I don't have a strong issue about trees as being sacred, but I don't want to take down a tree if we don't have to. I'd sacrifice a tree for the greater good, but I'm going with the neighbors on on this grove of trees. It's important to them, therefore I'm going to make it important to me. I generally like gravity systems. I'm not a big fan of the pumping systems. So in the community playfields, right now I think that gravity system, which is the larger Z tank, certainly what gets my attention. With regard to Hibbard, we didn't get many people that attend that meeting. That doesn't mean they don't care. We just didn't get very many people to give us much input. So with regard to future expansion and the options that have been provided, I do like the idea of preserving some of those trees. I personally would be able to give up some of the ball field, which wasn't one of the options presented. I think that we came up with plans that gave us two options for future expansion. I could compromise on, go with one of those plans and maybe give up one of the ball fields. Certainly seems to me that putting tanks on our ball fields kind of makes the most sense. So that's not an option that wasn't up there, but still, I like the idea of saving the trees, and if we move the tank down in the ball field, we might be able to get, we might even be able to eliminate the pumping at Hibbard, and that's another thing I would think would be an advantage. Thornwood, complicated. Community meeting was really heavily attended. It was a great discussion. Again, hats off to the people who attended, the staff. Everybody was cordial, although clearly there was a lot of concern. Personally, I don't know that Avoca makes sense. I can't see it, but I'll leave that to the engineers to support their decision to put it in Thornwood, but I'm not sure about moving it to Avoca. I would support alternative 2 because of the trees. I think the neighborhood has made that loud and clear. There's sacrifices that still would have to be made. I think we have to keep a strong eye on that pumping station. I'm going to question, I know it's the village's decision, I'm going to question the emergency generators. It reduces maintenance costs, reduces construction costs, reduces the disruption for testing. That the generator is a lot more trouble than the pumps, reduces the size of the housing. Temporary mobile generators are perhaps an option, but I'm not the village. This is their plan. This is their pumps. I can't dictate that, but I would strongly question the need for emergency generator in that location. And that's where I'm thinking. So I've appreciated all the community input, and we are not voting, so nothing's set in stone. But that's what I'm thinking. That's where I'm going.
Thank you. Would other commissioners like to chime in?
I actually had
Go around?
a question based on one of the public comments for the engineers. Whether it's there's a pumping station or not, some of these are kind of tight, and you're trying to fit these tanks, and there are big trees next to the tanks. What's the chance of, number one, the trees being affected a year, 2, 3 down the line? Number 2, what's the chances of the trees affecting the tanks a year, 2, 3 down the line, and perhaps infiltrating the sides, or we have to do significant repairs?
Good evening. I'm happy to take that question. You may know we have 2 really well-credentialed foresters on staff, and that's what we do. We build construction projects, and we for the Sheridan Road is a perfect example. It was a $20 million reconstruction of Sheridan Road, and we replaced every water service and sanitary service up and down the road and weaved them in between all those large trees. And we did it successfully. To my knowledge, all the trees are still there, and they're healthy and they're thriving. So we're not going to get that close. Thankfully, we have a team of engineers who can configure the tank to give us as much clearance away from the root zone as possible and some buffer. And I guarantee we will have our foresters keeping a very close eye on me and on them to make sure that we don't do anything to harm those trees.
What about the trees affecting the tanks later on?
I do not see that being problematic at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for discussion? Cecilia, you want to?
I just think after looking at and hearing those, as far as community playfields, I think I'm kind of with Brian. I like the Z shape. It is still a gravity. The gravity, and it seems, it's a loss of 2 trees, but it's only a loss of 2 trees. So I'm just generally there. And Hibbard, I don't know. I guess I'm still not too sure on Hibbard. On Thornwood, let me go back to that. I mean, I will make sort of a comment with at an estimated $20,000 a year. I mean, the savings of doing a pump, we're looking at like about 57 years for break even. And at that point, that was the question of when do we need to be replacing the storage tanks? So we're almost, it seems like we may even be at a point where by the time you need to, you've kind of used up that savings, we're even already building the tanks. So Yeah, I'm leaning a little bit more toward that configuration. I'm leaning toward that configuration.
the alternative,
yeah,
yes,
with
okay.
the pump
With
on
the
that
pump,
one.
yep.
And hybrid, I guess it is true, and I guess there's another question with hybrid. Do we have to have just one tank, or could that be divided, as I think maybe Brian said with the baseball fields, we have 2 baseball fields that are separated. Could we do 2 tanks there under each of those baseball fields as opposed to I was saying here, I think the east side, if we are doing 1 tank, it should be better with the pump, it should be on the east side, not the west side, just because the west side, you're closer to other neighbors' homes as opposed
And I
to the
think
side
part of that design also depended on if we do
I mean, I know it's partly where
construction
yes, the
possibly in the
possibility,
100-year future.
But I guess that is one other question. Could you do 2 tanks under 2 separate ball fields as opposed to
Ask them.
1 tank?
Yes, that is a great question, and that certainly would be an option to have, the tanks at 2 separate locations.
Would you need 2 pumps, or could they both be gravity
Or could it
fed?
be
Or
gravity-
how
that's what I was
You'd
wondering,
have
could
to
you do-
connect them,
Okay.
and then you could use 1 pump
Okay.
or 1 gravity outlet.
Okay.
Yeah, but you'd have to connect them.
Because there is a potential that that could be gravity, yeah. I mean, if we can do gravity, because again, the fewer moving parts, usually the better, so, but it may not be.
Thanks. Julia?
Yeah, would you prefer we discuss now, or?
Yeah, I think we're going to have a discussion now so everyone can kind of hear what we're going to
Yeah,
say, if that's
good.
okay, and then we'll kind of talk about moving forward.
Absolutely. So I am very encouraged about the alternatives. I think it's really nice to see these were brought forward. I would be curious on why they weren't evaluated in the first iteration. So I'm thankful for public comment to have this, rise to the level of the discussion that we've had. I am curious about Avoca. It is a wide playing field with no trees in the interior of the park. So I'd be curious to know if that is an option or an alternative to help go from a 10-year to a 15 or further expansion. I'm happy to discuss now, or if that's something we should discuss later.
Do we own Avoca? Is that part of, don't we rent? Yeah, that's another thing.
So
We
it's
don't-
District 37.
Right,
Right,
but
it's not, so it's not a park
land.
district land.
Right,
Sure.
But yeah, but they can talk to that. It's still village.
Yeah.
Sure. So Avoca Park, we would have to take the water from the Beechwood area and bring it in a large diameter storm sewer under the roads to Avoca Park. And
The
then,
distance is the factor?
yes, it's about 9,500 linear feet.
Okay.
And when you start to total up how much dollars per linear foot we're looking at when you put in a large diameter storm sewer and reconstructing the roadways, it's many millions of dollars to add that on.
So just so I understand, so the neighborhoods here, you're taking all that water, transferring it way over here, storing it while sewers are full, and then taking it all the way back to the sewer. So it's like kind of a, I got it.
Thank you.
If I could add to that, I dare say there's usually an engineering solution that they're very good. They can come up with pumps and pipes to get the water where it needs to go. But cost was an issue for the village board. This is already a $68 million project, and money is concerning to the village board. And so any project that adds millions of dollars of cost at this point, I dare say they would not likely entertain.
Agreed. And as we are stewards of finances as well for the village and everyone that lives here, we want to make sure that we're being cost effective as well. So, yes, thank you. Anything else?
Thank you.
Gordon?
I don't want to repeat what everybody else has said, but certainly anytime we can do gravity instead of the pumps, that's great. But at the same time, the initial proposal with all the trees being taken out was really a non-starter. And so I kind of don't even look at those as real alternatives. And so we're looking at the alternatives themselves. At the end of the day, both the village and the park district have to be comfortable with the ultimate solution. We're sort of a veto, I guess, on the village in the sense that they need our agreement. But, we're all serving the same people. And, I think at the end of the day, we're much closer to the final solution now because of it. So.
I'll make my comments. I would like to reiterate to everybody, we all live in the community. We all have kids that have played in these parks. My kids still go to Thornwood and all these parks, and we want to make sure that we're being good stewards and making sure that they're put back together and we're preserving the aesthetics and the use and everything with that. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're being good neighbors and helping those that live in these highly affected areas by the floodwater. So we're trying to come up with the best possible solution. We love all the input from everybody, and we take that into consideration as we're working through a good final solution. One of the things that is important to me is making sure that we're solving these current water issues we have in the parks. Community playfields tends to flood on these big days, as does Thornwood and these other parks. So making sure that that's one of the solutions that comes out of it. I want to make sure that we're providing alternatives for these parks during construction. So one of the things that happened at our last meeting was the Baseball Association came to us, said, where are we going to play when this is all kind of shut down? So we need to be cognizant that we're offering up alternatives to the community, whether it's a park playground structure or a tennis court or a baseball field or whatever we're doing, that there's somewhere else that you can go during construction. So we're very mindful of that. I personally like the idea of adding, if we are going to have pump stations, of adding a bathroom at the playfields and Thornwood. I think those would be great additions in both of those parks for families. I, like I said, have been there for many years and had young kids and would love to have had bathrooms in both those locations. So I think that would be a good addition at both those sites. I don't think it's as necessary at Hibbard because we do have a building there that has great bathrooms, so I don't think that's as necessary. One of the other things that came up, and as we're still talking about it, we need to consider what we're going to put back into these parks after, if there are other amenities that would like to be added besides, like I just mentioned, a bathroom. We've had somebody say maybe having a small sledding hill at Thornwood. I don't know if the neighbors would be open to adding a little bit more dirt over there for sledding. That's come up before. And finally, if we do have to remove trees, we have every intention of replacing them so that the trees that are there now that are taking in carbon dioxide and sucking up the water, we will replace with other trees that will do that same thing. We don't want to take away any of those great benefits and the natural processes that are going on in the parks currently. So I also agree. I love the idea of having gravity fed if we could, but I do like the idea of a bathroom at the playfields if the pump station works there. I think alternative 2 at Thornwood is a great compromise, and as long as the residents feel like that's a good one as well, I think that's great. And Hibbard, I feel like there's a little bit more flexibility, but I think we can accommodate what needs to be done as well as any kind of future planning that we have for the building structure there as well. We want to make sure that we're looking long enough term into the future that we're not selling ourselves short now. So that's kind of where I stand on all this.
If I may,
Yes.
having lived through a bathroom controversy or two, and I tend to agree with you, but I'd really love to continue to hear from the neighborhoods with regard to those bathrooms and let them articulate their support or lack thereof for those bathrooms. But I could get behind that if they are.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of you go to a lot of different parks in different communities, and pretty much all of them do have some sort of bathroom, and they're locked at night, so there's no safety concerns. There's ways to patrol and police all that to mitigate anybody's concerns there. So, all right, any other comments on stormwater at this point? Because we'll kind of check that off our agenda here. If not, then we will be moving forward on to approving of the voucher list.
All right. I move to approve the voucher list in the amount of $3,441,547.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
And 54 cents. How could they be leaving?
I know, they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear about the money.
This is the good stuff. I second the motion made by Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you. Julia, second.
They would give him a second here.
Sorry, we'll give you all a second to head out. Thanks again.
Because I didn't finish my motion.
It was well done.
The first half was
Very nicely done.
the first half. The second half was non-existent.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the voucher list and a second. Are there any questions or comments on the voucher list? I had one. On the first page, under Biltmore Commercial Refrigeration, it says freezer repair for pool and concession stand project. Are those, they weren't repairing, they weren't repairing anything down at the beach, right? That was just, okay, I just want to make sure. I'm like, we just put all that in.
Yes.
Okay, that was my only question. Okay. It's just two separate.
Just the wording.
Just the wording. Okay, that was my only question. Anybody else?
I just had one question for Steve. That Siegel bill for $2,500, is that an ongoing thing every year? Yes. Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions? May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yes.
Voucher list is approved.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Executive Director's Report.
Oh, boy. Completely unprepared for this part of the meeting.
What do you have to say about stormwater?
Thank you for coming, engineers.
Thank you, Daryl.
You left my clicker, right?
Trying to walk out with it.
Never trusted an engineer in my life.
I can vouch for that.
Thank you.
Is that on the record, Steve?
All right, director's report. We're talking about stormwater. That's the start of the report. I think we've done a great job tonight. Independence Day celebration coming up July 3rd. In the past, we've done the fun run, possibly on one day, possibly on a different day, on the 4th, the fireworks on the 3rd, depending on what day the holiday fell on. Our fun run participation numbers have dropped drastically over the last several years.
I'll be there.
I've been doing it.
Thank you for your dedication. But overall, our numbers have dropped. It hasn't been weather-driven. It hasn't been day-of-the-week driven. So this year, we're reinventing that and introducing the Yankee Doodle Dash. Instead of a 4-mile run, it's a 5K with other bells and whistles around it. And we are going to do all of the festivities all on the day of the 3rd. So we can start our morning on the 3rd down at Gilson with the 5K, go home, take your nap, rest up, relax, come back at 4:30 in the afternoon when we open up our games, rides, and festival stage, and conclude our night with the fireworks somewhere around 9:30 when darkness allows for that. As always, getting in and out of the park is of high concern when we have this number of people coming. And we are thankful again to have the cooperation of the Pace Bus Service, where people can park at Eden's Plaza, purchase a ticket for $4.50 and get a round-trip ticket, or really 2 tickets, one inbound, one outbound, to get into the park and out of the park safely. And the buses will be emptying the park as late as 11 p.m. after the fireworks conclude. Also looking forward to summer. Our concert series, I know it's June and it doesn't feel like summer yet. Our concert series, all the information's on our website. We have different concert series, whether it's Wallace Bowl or the gazebo at Malincrop Park. All of it falls under the title of Sounds of Summer. And there's plenty of options throughout the summer. You can find that at wilmetteparks.org. Camps, they start in a week as school lets out. Yeah, a week from today. School lets out this week, and we get going right away thereafter because, as a parent, I agree, we don't want our children at home. And so it's that time of the year where we make our report of the number of children enrolled. This is enrollment numbers. This isn't individual children. So if you're in one section of a 4-week camp and another section of another 4-week camp, you're going to be counted twice when we run these reports. Superintendent Gwynn ran the report for me today across all of our camps, across all operating segments of our district. Camps we facilitate, camps that outside contractors facilitate. We're at 5,988 children or enrollments in our camps, and that number obviously will continue to increase as people are looking for options throughout the summer. So we have a busy summer ahead of us. Our camp counselor training has already begun with our director training that has already taken place, and this upcoming week the counselors come in for a very rigorous and comprehensive training so we can make sure that everyone has a good time, stays safe, and we have a successful summer. The only other thing that I feel like I should report on is this past Saturday we had a new event in conjunction with the Wilmette Foundation. The Wilmette Beach Bash took place down at Gilson Park as a kickoff to summer, a celebration of the new beach facilities. It was more successful than initial estimates. We had approximately 1,200 tickets sold, approximately 1,200 people through the door, and the vast majority of those individuals were Wilmette residents who were very excited about the event itself as well as the new facilities at Gilson. I spoke with many people and then spoke with people who spoke to people, and every ounce of feedback that I've received to date about the new facility and the event has been extremely positive. So I think we can can all be very happy with the end results down at Gilson. And we all know that it's been a long road getting there, and it's nice that we've arrived. So with that, looking at your agenda, you do have a couple items on your action list here. In particular, underneath the Financial Planning and Policy Committee, you have the acceptance of the annual audit known as the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or, since we speak in acronyms, the CAFR. And that report was presented to the Finance Committee, and they will make a more detailed report on that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you to Steve Wilson and the entire Park District staff and all the volunteers from the foundation for an amazing Saturday night. The sunset couldn't have been better.
You're welcome for that.
The sunset was amazing. I love that you ordered that up. The bonfire was great, and I know that was all you.
That was Jerry.
Oh, Jerry, that was awesome. That was so cool. It was a great event, and I know that everyone I spoke to had fun, whether they were young kids or middle-aged or older. Everybody, it was just a great event for everyone, and a fun night, and hopefully we'll continue the tradition. And I had people asking me if we could do it every week, and I didn't think that was possible. So,
no, that's not happening.
But maybe next year. So thank you to all your hard work on that. We so appreciate it because it highlights all the great things you all do. So thank you. Any other questions for Steve?
I just want to echo, it was a great event, and I want to thank the staff that worked as well. So I know Emily and Jerry are both here, and want to thank you for your work, and also many other staffers who are not present.
Yep.
So.
One question: where did you find that band? They were terrific.
You know, that's the beauty of the collaboration with the foundation. That came by way of a member of the foundation board.
They were spectacular.
Yeah. So everything about the event was good.
Hats off to the foundation.
Yep.
As well.
Yes.
Thank you. And hopefully they raise some good money, too.
Jerry getting there at 6 a.m. and leaving at 6 a.m.
He's not being all that
Impressive.
facetious.
Okay, next up, committee reports. Lakefront Committee.
Oh yeah, we actually had a meeting.
All right.
So we had a long meeting, although not a whole lot of diversity in the discussion. Mostly it had to do with the lakefront project. Lots of great suggestions. Many of them. The main point is we opened the lakefront on time. We weren't 100% done when we opened, but it was safe, and things have been wrapped up, like landscaping. Many of the comments had to do with things that are being wrapped up. By next month, I think we can tick most of those items off. But we had lots of people who came to the meeting who wanted to comment about the lakefront project, and I'll just take that as general excitement by the community, and that was fine. Langdon Park, the playground has been put in. Jerry, it looks terrific. And we had an update on that. The path down at Langdon Park to the beach is pretty narrow now, as is the beach. So please use caution if you try to access the beach or what remains of it at Langdon. And then the other item had to do with, now that we've completed the beach house, there were things within the original survey for Gilson Park that were not addressed with this project, and we're going to take that up, both Finance Committee and the Lakefront Committee, in terms of what other things might be needed, specifically roads, but I'm sure the good discussions will be more well-rounded than that. But the roads are in not great shape. So we just talked that we're going to talk about that in the future, and the board should probably keep your eyes on that. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for the Lakefront Committee? Thank you very much, Brian. Moving along to Parks and Rec, does not have a...
No, so that's a typo.
Okay, sorry. They met earlier this evening. And
correct. And I will be delivering that report as I helped facilitate that meeting tonight. And it was about halfway through the meeting when I realized I was going to have to give that report tonight. So we're going to go extremely high level and just touch on the highlights that were reported by the various managers and the discussion at the committee. Over at the ice rink, they had a very successful ice show over Mother's Day weekend. Over 500 tickets sold for each of the 3 different days of performances. So that is always a fun and annual successful event. A not annual event that we did in the weeks following was we hosted the ISI Championships. So over 250 skaters from 7 different states came and competed. A very busy weekend that was a successful budgetary impact for us in a time of year that we don't normally have a lot of ice sales. So nice that we were able to host that. Looking across some of the other reports, something else I really am happy to highlight is over at Mallinckrodt on June 1st, we had the now the 2nd annual Doggy Fashion Show. And while the number of dogs may not have been as great as it has in the past, the crowd has gotten larger. So I think we're onto something there. So that's going to be a fun new little tradition that we can help grow over time. And then the bulk of the conversation at the meeting was around concerns that were raised by residents about the sizable wait lists for after-school recreation. Superintendent Gwynn, in cooperation with her staff, have come up with solutions for the 2019-2020 school year to clear the waiting lists and even possibly create capacity over and beyond that if people who may not have chosen to register because they saw a waiting list still haven't found an option, they can come back to us. They also spoke about how in the years following next school year, we're looking at ways to reinvent the program to an extent to create better capacity at the outset in a more cohesive way. So a one-year solution with eyes towards a long-range solution. And even during the meeting, the 4 individuals who attended, we were soliciting input on ways that we can enhance the program. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation with the public around that to help make sure we're providing a product that meets their needs. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Parks and Recreation? All right, we'll move along to Golf Operations Committee.
Yes, the Golf Operations Committee met last week. The golf course continues to improve. Certainly rain is helpful, but also because the superintendent has led a series of projects related to drainage, so that is helping improve the conditions as well, improving playability. Despite the rain they had, revenue was consistent with expectations, and they continue to see memberships be consistent with what is happening in the golf industry overall. So as part of the meeting, we reviewed a business plan that the team had assembled about a year and a half ago, and they are executing that plan. They will be updating the plan based on the last year's plans and results, and then will be working with us to help bring that plan to life. So all in all, we are at where we expect for this season, this time of year, and looking forward to hopefully a very sunny and warm golf season the rest of the year, now that we have the rain out of the way.
Great. Let's hope.
You wish.
Thank you. Any questions for the Golf Committee? Hearing none, we'll move along to Financial Planning and Policy Committee.
All right. The Financial Planning and Policy Committee for May met on June 3rd. Got pushed back due to some scheduling conflicts. The only item on the agenda was the review and the approval of the CAFR, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It's a combination of an audit report, a management discussion and analysis, supplemental information, statistical data, and then usually there's a letter in there giving us some feedback of things we can do to improve. And for the first year in my 4 years here, there was nothing in the letter. So
That's
Steve
impressive.
Holloway.
No exceptions.
Yep.
That was
he's
great.
knocked it down. I think when prior years, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there were probably 3 or 4 items on there. Got it down to 1 last year, 0 this year. So congratulations.
So how are you going to improve next year?
Great job, Steve.
Yeah, no. So it's very exciting. I had a chance to go through the report in great detail, so I'm comfortable with it, and as is the rest of my committee. So I think we're going to make the recommendation that we approve that.
All right.
I will do that right now. Any questions?
Any questions on the CAFR?
No? Between the CAFR and the budget packet in December, those are the two documents for me that are like have every piece of information you could possibly ever need. So just, if you keep nothing else, keep those two things.
They're exciting to read.
I do want to say I'm grateful of Gordon's skills and his expertise on this, and I think the Finance Committee, it's a great committee because of that, and he always
thank you.
pours through these.
That's what I say, if you approve it, I approve it.
All right. I move to accept the December 31st, 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report as recommended by the Financial Planning and Policy Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Deal. CAFR is accepted.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is unfinished business. We have stormwater update, which we've already discussed, but there is kind of one little piece I'd like to still kind of discuss, and that's kind of next steps moving forward. So I kind of want to ask Steve, what is it that you need from us in order to have a vote at the next, or what should we be looking for as far as having a vote moving forward so that we can get an agreement with the village, whether it's a memo or an official agreement?
So I took away from tonight about 5 questions that the board had and a handful of questions that the public had that I want to bring back to the village, get those answers, disseminate them back to all of you. And then I really think, we can start having conversations about the concept overall and even some of the details of some of these alternatives. As I put in my memo for this packet, the village has indicated that a conceptual understanding, even something as formal as a possible memorandum of understanding, is if they want to keep their project on their timeline, they would like to have that by August. Reason for that is, while the intergovernmental agreement may not be done, if we're all comfortable enough with concept, then they can at least have their engineers progress with the design without possibly wasting money because they're going to be asked to take a left or a right or stop altogether. So that's their request. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to adhere to that time frame. We have to make sure we're comfortable in taking that next step. But if August is what they're looking to accomplish as far as timeline is concerned, and I think we need to be prepared to have a very direct conversation come July.
So that would be our next meeting.
Correct.
So I'm sure I heard you correctly, but I just want to reiterate. So what we're talking about here by August is to try to have these plans as presented by the engineers. We've reached basically an understanding on those plans, but the intergovernmental agreement would follow, because we haven't started on the intergovernmental.
Correct.
Obviously, a big part of the agreement are the plans themselves.
Correct.
But there's a lot in an intergovernmental agreement.
Yes, there is, yes.
So that could stretch out. All right. Yeah.
So again, to clarify, so at our next meeting, would the village want us to come to an agreement as a board and saying, okay, we like alternative 2 in this park, we like alternative 1 in this park, or like
Yeah, I
that
had
kind
a
of
similar question.
detail?
How specific
How
do we need to
specific do
be?
they want it?
Yeah, I believe that's
Cool.
That's what
as
they want.
specific as they're
Okay.
hoping for.
Okay. Okay.
Whether we're going to feel like we can give that level of specificity,
Yes.
then, that we have to determine what our comfort level is. But that would be, from their vantage point, ideal. Because if they're really looking to tell their engineers, okay, start doing a little more detailed drawing, they're going to want to know, is it at community playfields, is it the initial design, or is it the Z, design, or is it the third option?
Right.
So, because if it's still up in the air, there's really nothing for them to move forward with.
Right.
So will you be sharing this information before the July meeting so we can be ready to?
Right.
Absolutely.
give it
That's
up?
Absolutely. I'm hoping to
You're not
get,
bringing-
I'm
you're not
hoping to
bringing-
get answers to these questions within the next day or two. Back to all of you. And it's quite possible that one meeting won't be enough time. And so we should hold open the option that if we are trying to meet a deadline or a time frame, that maybe additional meetings will need to be scheduled and held, so more information or more discussion can take place.
So we could have a committee of the whole meeting and have, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So that being said, are there any other questions that you would like Steve to ask the village that would help clarify for your thought process and your decision-making? Because I think
Well,
this
they
is a
were-
good time to get those answers.
Well, I think they were raised. I mean, do the bathrooms, emergency generators? There were a lot of little issues.
Yeah.
I think from a macro level, it's a tall order, but I think it could happen by August. On a micro level, like, what's that pump house going to look like?
Right.
Don't know. I mean,
Correct.
that's kind of, our construction methodologies and things like that. That might stretch out, but it doesn't stop the engineers
Correct.
from proceeding at least with a schematic design. They're conceptual now, right?
Right.
So they want to move into schematic.
Yeah.
I had one question, and it kind of goes back to the cottonwood trees. And as Bridget mentioned, they have 2 foresters on the village, as in village employees. These cottonwood trees suck up a lot of water, and if we take all that water away, will they survive? Is that something that we?
They didn't
That's
say
interesting.
that
Still
the
leaving
but
the-
the retention
I thought we're
pond,
still
didn't
leaving
they
the
say the
detention
retention
pond
pond is still
with
there?
the-
I thought we were taking the
No.
water out of the park
Not
so that
the
we could use
Z-
that area.
Not in the Z,
Right.
the Z shape. If it was the, I think, because that's what he said, they had to create a new retention.
Good question.
But the
And
Z
added to
shape,
the
he
list.
said,
Yeah, some more-
kept the retention pond so that it would still
Much
catch.
like the question about thornwood in the grass, are we
Right.
going to
Right.
alter the environment?
Right.
It's a good
So
question.
from,
Still a good question. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still a good question.
For me, we only have one community play field, and this is it. Like, we have lots of parks, which I love, but this is the one place where we have play fields, soccer fields, lacrosse fields, baseball fields. I would like to maximize, and without getting rid of trees, but maximize as much of the space as we can for additional programming, so that if that entails getting rid of that current detention pond or detention area, that holds water, so that, and again, not removing the trees, but that area that's kind of like slumped down, and so that we could put a field over there, I would love to see that done. So I don't know if that's something that's possible.
That's interesting, because if they are impacted by the lack of water,
Right.
I wonder, on a related note, has the forestry team weighed in on the quality of cottonwood trees?
So they
There
have, that
was-
was in that report.
Yeah, it was in
They're
the
only
report.
rated as, I
They're
think,
rated as
fair.
good.
Fair.
Or good,
They're
like, so
more
it's
than
out of a
fair.
5
3 out
point,
of 5.
It was
3 out of a
high,
5?
yeah. They were like 3.
So if you take the water out, what happens to those trees?
But the Z pattern looks like it doesn't, see, it's like,
Yes.
like this section here is not touched.
Right.
But in this one it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think with the Z, you don't touch that. I don't know that you'd want to touch that.
But if you're taking the water out of here, because they're going to take water out of the fields to go into the tank, and this is naturally becomes no longer water filled.
Well, I guess that's
here-
one of our-
here's
still be
here's
water.
the
I mean,
general
water
thought
doesn't- How does the
process.
water get
I thought there
into
would
the
still be
tank?
water
You
there.
know, because it's, I would think it would just be impervious and sort of go on the edges and somehow.
So
Yeah.
the general thought process here is these tanks are taking excess water. They're not taking the water that falls in the kind of storms we've had through May.
Right.
You know, so things like grass and trees are going to be fine. You know, they just won't have the standing water around them after more serious rain events. So I don't think we need to worry about that. The concern about how quickly does the water disappear if there's trees versus there isn't trees is a legitimate one we've heard people raise. But I don't think there's a ton of concern about the overall well-being of these trees, because most of the rain events aren't a significant rain event. They're going to still get their water.
And judging by all the other parks we've seen where these exist, they are not scorched earth parks. They are clearly
Right.
thriving
Oh,
parks.
yeah.
So,
I guess my thing, though, is if we use the Z and save the cotton trees, is there space for another playfield there? Because then you still have the retention pond. So I'm saying you do not get the.
you don't get
You don't
the-
get any benefit in the long
You
run.
don't get that, but you are still having.
It's in effect the same park, except the one big tree right in the middle of the upper part of the Z.
Yeah.
That does kind of hamstring our flexibility of field configurations. That would go away, so we do get a little benefit, a little flexibility there, but we're not necessarily adding playfield space to the overall framework of community
And I guess
playfields.
my last question, because I think I read something that District 39 kind of was hoping maybe they get that area where the groves, or is that true, or they wanted that area?
The input I've received both by way of children who go to Highcrest, as well as through not anyone officially at the schools, but through people who've talked to school officials, is that, you know, the gym teachers and things like that, they often have days they can't get out there and do what's on their lesson plan because of the soft turf conditions out there. So for them, if there was now a more level, flat, usable playing space that drained properly, then they would be able to do more of what their intent is.
It seems to me that the play fields, unlike the other ones, I still think of it as an active use facility.
Every day.
And where
Right.
I love trees, but I almost wonder if we could have more trees in better locations that would allow us to increase the use, whereas the other locations.
I mean, this is some of the things that balancing, but I suppose part of it, what we still don't know the answer is how close are these trees to the end of their natural lives? Because like cottonwoods, from my knowledge, do not live that long, and that they may, and I think that's an answer we don't really have. I mean, I think the idea is that these trees are in good condition, but how close are,
Aren't they
to-
volunteer
Good question.
trees that may have sprouted over time?
They may have been, it's possible that they were planted there because they do take up a lot of water.
I do have a question about Hillcrest or Highcrest.
Oh, yeah, it does say Hillcrest.
Do we know if the district has future plans to expand that we might need to accommodate or consider? I know we've thought through perhaps our own facility expansion or perhaps municipal expansion in other parks.
Yeah, there are no plans that I've had articulated to me. I know that the village has been communicating with District 39. I know that President Wolf has reached out to board members at District 39 to make sure they're aware of this project and that they're thinking about their future development, similar to what we were thinking about at Hibbert Park. At this point, no one has raised those concerns. Just, again, they don't necessarily, to expand into this footprint, they're already on the Park District land with the existing facilities, so they would be, they would have to come further onto Park District land to do those expansions. So maybe that's why they don't necessarily look at it and think that way, because they don't have ownership rights.
And I seem to recall from when I was there, when they were looking at demographic projections, there wasn't a huge increase in a number of students coming into the district.
And they just added on, they just put 4 new classrooms on, so they've just extended it. So I don't, And I have spoken with, as Mr. Wilson said, with the prior president of the school board, and they were comfortable with the plan as it was and any kind of current planning.
Good,
So,
great.
Okay, so as far as next steps, so you're going to ask village questions, we'll get some answers, we'll take that into account and start kind of formulating our own ideas, and if we need to have another committee of the whole meeting to have a public discussion, in public, not a public discussion, our discussion in public, we can do that prior to the next July meeting, so that we could potentially vote or something in July.
Commissioner Murdoch grabbed me on Saturday night and started talking about wanting to do something with one of the field, I don't know which one, in order to make some kind of revenue-generating field. And I said, Mike, this is not the time or place, but is that something he's talked to you about, Steve, that playfields?
Well, I think, yes, it is. And I think it's, I've had one-off conversations with many of you about the different parks and what could be in the parks when the project's over with. And that's another step in this process, maybe not for July, but definitely prior to an intergovernmental agreement, that we need to kind of have a brainstorming session about, what do we want in these parks? Do we want bathrooms? Do we want irrigation? Do we want turf fields or natural grass? Do we want a sled hill? Do we want this, that, or the other thing? All sorts of ideas that I've talked to a lot of you about, ideas I have on my own. And so, yes, I've had that conversation with him. I think that's an intriguing thought that the rest of the board should consider at some point.
And would that need to have some sort of direction or resolution by August for the village?
No.
For example, if there was going to be lighting or, something like that.
In my opinion, it doesn't have to be. The concept of where the tanks go can be held out independently of those options of what goes back in the park once the tanks are constructed. That definitely needs to be flushed out by the time an intergovernmental agreement is being constructed.
Okay, I'm just thinking, if you're going to put lights in, which he didn't say anything about them, but I'm trying to take it to the next level. It's got to go around the tank, not in the tank probably, or else they got to do something special.
Correct.
So I'm just pointing that out, that,
One of the things that came up tonight was the placement of, if we do a pump house, where we would put it. And I think I would ask staff to weigh in heavily on that, where they would like to see that structure, if in these parks we have to put it, because obviously you all are in the parks on a daily basis and would probably have the best idea of where they should go. And that's probably something the village would want to know, because that would determine where the pipes are going, is my understanding. So.
Correct.
All of this is pointing out the need for continuing dialogue. And so when we did West Park, we did kind of sign off on a plan, and then we didn't really see it again, and then the tank got changed a lot. And that's fine. That's water under the sewers or whatever. But yeah, I went for a metaphor there. So I know I shouldn't have to say it, but I do want to say that my expectation was to be to continue to engage the village throughout their design process with more presentations. Obviously, people in the audience here had concerns about details. We have concerns about details. And I just hope that we continue to flesh these things out. And, the approval, whatever approval we give them by August isn't like, okay, well, here we go. And they just start rolling along without us. So I just wanted to say that.
All right, so do you feel comfortable with?
I do.
Okay, with next steps.
Just wanna make
and
sure
everybody
we're all
else
on the
feels
same
comfortable?
page.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're all.
So, well, just to follow up, Steve mentioned potentially getting together at times other than the scheduled meetings in order to meet the deadline the village should meet. Just be careful about vacations and stuff like that, because we don't want to miss these meetings.
Right.
So just,
They're critical.
yeah, so it might help if we
Yeah,
share.
we're already
if we have-
missing one commissioner tonight who I know is gone for several weeks in the month of June. So getting everyone together might prove to be quite a difficult task.
Yeah.
Right. But we will do our best, because this is an important issue, and we would love to get the project started for the residents. So, all right, moving on, next agenda item, new business. Is there any new business before the board? All right, hearing none, adjournment. I move to adjourn. All those in favor?
Second. Aye.
Thank you. Second, aye. Thank you.